today, the future of our cities. Thomas Willemeit. Applaus. Thomas is a great musician, and he's also a great architect. We studied together in the city of Braunschweig, the TU, as many people in this room. And after that, you went to Los Angeles to found GRAFT Architects together with Lars Krückeberg and Wolfram Putz. And you came back to my eyes when it was published that you worked together with Brad Pitt. That was a great moment, seeing these guys together with this famous actor. And but seriously, they went on to work on architecture. They have developed a very special style of architecture, recognizable in a way. And I'm very proud that we, from time to time, work together, from time to time, celebrate together, like last Saturday. And I'm very curious what you are saying today. Thank you very much for coming. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for the nice introduction, and first of all, thanks to all the students who have presented their work today. That was really inspiring. As we, together with Dario and also with Stefan, we've been talking so much about Expo 2035 in Berlin, and have made so many images and plans and everything. It's just super inspiring to get some new influence, some new input, something to think about, something that we have not been thinking about before. So thank you very much for coming from all over the world, all over Germany, here to present your ideas. It was really inspiring, and even if we had some criticism, take it as like a possibility to further improve. It has a very good level already, so would like to encourage you to keep that spirit. It was fun already. But coming back to what Stefan was saying, it's always great to come back into the GMP universe. Yeah, we have our paths crossed so much in the past, not only at the university but also in other locations. We've had with GRAFT from 2003 on. We had an office in Beijing, and that's where we also had much more connection and to do with each other. Some partners really have built such big friendships between the offices. And from time to time, as Stefan was saying, also now for the Expo, we have the joy and the honor again to work together, to think together, and see how we can contribute something to the world that grows together, maybe not back, but grows together. I would like to talk about the future of our cities, as you see here, and the subtitle is a little bit complex: How Urban Environments Benefit from Contemporary Mobility Concepts. It's very, very important. So I'm not going to talk about architecture in the first place, but mobility and mixed-use intelligence. So what that means, I will try to explain in the next hour. And I would like to start with a connected world. This is something that not only in a World Expo, it's very important to understand how we talk to each other, how we meet. But I would say that our cities today only survive and are only successful if they're connected well. It doesn't depend so much on the beauty of the architecture, the cultural background we're coming from, the wealth of a country or a city, but the success of a city comes from how well it is connected with other cities. That's the basis, because being connected means the exchange of people. People travel from one city to the other. People exchange ideas. They bring inspirational ideas to another background. And that's where something very important is happening. In the head, you are confronted with the possibility that life could be different, or that your understanding of the world is maybe only one point of view of the many possibilities. And that brings your head in motion. That mental mobility makes you wish to understand, maybe try out something new. And this is what at the end is the engine and the fuel for economy. Because that's basically what the city is. A city is the presentation and the place where change is happening, and that's why mobility issues are so important. So when you look at the European map, everybody of you knows the map of the nations and the borders of the nations, but we all know the borders of the nations are not so important anymore. What the European Union and the European Commission is focusing on is something that they call the 10T, Trans-European Networks. So they're very much focusing on how well the cities are connected. This is the reality of Europe, is basically a network of cities, of thoughts and inspiring nucleuses that are part of a larger rhizome or a larger network. This is what we all depend on, that we're very well connected. And if we look at other countries, for example, China is at the moment very much focusing on the new Silk Roads, as they call it. I mean, you have talked so much about it also. The connections over the oceans, the little gateway at Singapore and so on. So China is very much focusing at the moment on developing a new landline through China, yes, but also through Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, through Iran, to get a landline connection from the east to the Far East to Europe. This is a game changer. And you can imagine what then happens is not only that some toys from China end up in Berlin, but on the way, all the cities are also connected. They are also connected to these two cultural big entities or areas. And that's why there's so much change and so much economic growth at the moment. Iran is kind of a complicated partner here, as everybody knows, but all the other countries, there's a lot of development going on. If you go there, there's Chinese tourists, Indian people who run through the streets of Almaty in Kazakhstan. It's great. So these connections and the possibility for people to meet and exchange ideas and goods, that is what cities depend on. And if you then look at what that means for the cities, is that traffic, circulation, mobility issues dominate how our cities look today. So in some areas, you see how infrastructure buildings like train stations, parking lots, tram stations occupy a large chunk of the cities of today. And this will even grow. The passenger demand for Germany will double by 2050. Imagine that, like the passenger demand for the ICE trains, they are not punctual today, so what will happen in 2050? So there's a radical new things to be developed. That's why we need new ideas, and we at GRAFT have had the chance and the joy to work with some of the mobility companies that are new on the block on new mobility possibilities for the future. So what you look at here is the first visualization that we've done for the Hyperloop Consortium. You probably know what the Hyperloop is. Tubes with little cabins that are shooting through at a very high speed at 500 kilometers an hour. And the idea, of course, is to provide an alternative to flight connections. On the ground, less energy demand, very easy and protected. And the location for these tubes are chosen already. These tubes should run in the middle of the existing highways, the existing freeways, the Autobahn in Germany. Why? Because then you can ignore and you do not have to go through all the bureaucratic messes in acquiring land and trying to deal with local ownerships on both sides, and it's a much faster process. So this is what these capsules at the end of the day will probably going to look like, but maybe more interesting is for you to understand how it works. So we've done a little movie to explain how the system will be working, because it's based on single capsules that you board somewhere where you are. Then these capsules find their train at some node locations, and then they speed up and then they run super fast. And the next question, of course, is how do you get off the train? Because people have different destinations, so you would one of these capsules will slow down and then take a detour, and you can get off the train and get to other modes of transportation. So that's the whole system. It's based on never-ending, always running trains that you hook onto or you detach from while driving. And of course, we're studying what's going to happen, what always happens all around a station where you stop. Of course, the real estate value goes up. New possibilities for developments of suburbs and cities are growing all around these stops along the way. And of course, at the end of the day, this might be the most appropriate way also to connect the fast flight connections, the long haul flights, then to local transport, and to connect even cities that are not very well connected to airports, also to the flight networks of the future. So what we're doing right now is we're trying to help the technicians to think atmosphere and these locations where you board and how they are connected also to other modes of transportation and so on. But one aspect here is interesting, that we're looking at the third dimension of mobility. So that's why I was so interested in the last group that presented. I very much believe in the third dimension, as humanity has already discovered the subway, so the connections in the ground. That's the third dimension down, but the third dimension up has only been celebrated by Wuppertal, right? And some other few locations on this planet. And I think we need to address that. And one company that does that is the Volocopter company. Maybe you have heard of them. They are one out of 6 competitors that try to come up with taxi drones, so electric vehicles transporting 2 people at a time for super silent and easy hovering in space, and in the first place probably mostly emergency connections and touristic uses, but in the future this is of course a little vehicle that will replace all these super noisy, loud, dirty helicopter traffic in the big metropolises of the world. So the question is, how do you enter these? So we won the pitch for the Volocopter VTOLs, as we say, the vertical takeoff and landing platforms. The first prototype was built in Singapore a few years ago to show and explain how you would board this plane. I would not call it like this copter, this little vehicle, how all the process will work out, security issues and so on in the future. But coming back to the ground, emission-free driving, new designs for ultra-fast charging facilities, also something more closer to the contemporary today. This is also something that we discovered caused a mind shift in many people in the industry. So just the fact that you hang out in a charging facility for 20 or 25 minutes made them think about the quality of the design. Yeah, and we were all used to gas stations. We go in there, get some gas and drive out. But here you need to stay a little bit. So they were really anxious. How do we keep people? What can we do with these 25 minutes? And some shops and co-working facilities. So all these ideas created a completely new understanding of your time being mobile, because more and more we also understand it's not only a wasted time that we spend coming from A to B, but the time in between is also quality time. The the less you have to be focusing also on driving, let's just think about autonomous driving, the more you can talk to each other, like listen to music or work like while you're moving, what we do already in the ICE trains, for example. So all the time that you spend while moving is valuable time and is going to be looked at and subject to our architectural expertise. So we are ready, will all be ready. And there GRAFT is very much envying you guys who have done like how many hundreds of railway stations, you know that fact already. The architectural and spatial quality of the moments where you change one mode of transportation to the other is very important. And so these are the first designs for the fast, ultra-fast charging stations of E.ON that we've done quite some time ago. Some architecture for Volkswagen in Wolfsburg, where people pick up their ordered and bought the car they bought, where Volkswagen staff explains how to use the car and so on. So locations of transition. And I've also put in some projects of other people to underline and explain what I'm talking about. So this is a project that most of you know from Ingenhofen, and there's so much criticism, and the costs are like skyrocketing. But at the end of the day, similar to the Elbphilharmonie, people will be fascinated by the fact that the places that for a very long time we have thought would be just functional spaces where you get off the plane could be fascinating spaces and could be fascinated also pieces of architecture. And if you look to other cultures, I mean, it's crazy what's going on in Saudi Arabia. It's crazy what Hadid, our friends from Hadid Studio in London are providing at the moment. It's just a proof that the architecture, building for mobility, for the way we move in space, is becoming more and more important. And we were lucky to find Max Bögel, a big company that is focusing on prefab concrete elements, but also very much focusing on street construction, bridge construction all over Europe, a big construction company. They have been part of a big consortium to develop a high-speed magnetic train some time ago here in the north, in the Emsland. That experiment stopped, and Max Bögel was the only company that insisted on continuing and pursuing the same idea. They have now been working 15 years on coming up with a magnetic train concept with a super holistic approach. The company is providing 12-meter long pieces of tracks with the magnetic technology incorporated. They will be providing all the stations. They are also supplying the cabins, the wagons, the train itself, and also the operation for a system like this. So if you go to Max Bögel in the future, compare to what the Deutsche Bahn is doing, where you have one company that's doing the ground, and the next company is building the tracks, and the next company is providing the trains, and the next company is doing the operation, which makes it super complicated. This is a system that comes with everything out of one hand, and that's why we found it so interesting. And they came to us and they said, yeah, we've this system and it works very well and it's perfect, great, but it looks awful. So can you help us? And we said, yeah, we should come up with maybe a pilot track that's totally fantasy, but sounds plausible. And we proposed a connection from Berlin main railway station to what you are working on at the moment, to the Expo. All along like some rivers and parallel to railway tracks, so kind of plausible, realistic approach, although totally up in the air, and then try to understand how would stations look like, what would be then the preconditions, what would be necessary to develop. And the result was not only the track design, but also, of course, the stations made out of modular components, biomorphic kind of design, because we believe that this is very much representing like new modes of transportation or ways we move in space. And but it's all modular, can be prefabricated and brought to the site and implemented super fast. So if to build a train like this takes only a third of the time of a subway, it only costs a third of a subway. I sound like a marketing guy, right? Of these things. Okay, let's go to the design. So we tried to show how it would look like in the urban space, and I think these drawings show very well that it can be easily implemented in the urban fabric and in the urban spaces. For me, it was super fascinating to really focus also on the engineering part. So we needed to come up with an intelligent solution for the need to adjust to all kinds of angles of the track in the curves in different locations. And at the same time, the two tracks needed to be adjusted in height to always provide a horizontal emergency track in the middle. So that's why we came up with this interim layer that sits on a pillar, on a column, but allows the whole thing to turn to do a slight turn to adjust to all these necessities. And of course, that works very much like some areas in our bodies, how some bones work in our system. And then we had to come up with all these different solutions for different site conditions, like cantilevering parts, bridging, subconstructions, and so on. But even more important was at that point also to show how the system would look within an urban environment, like a typical Berlin road, for example. So you see how these columns can react to different site conditions. And in addition to the structural and engineering intelligence, we also thought there should be also some additional element to the tracks, that it doesn't look just technical, that it can be of a different value also for the urban space. So one idea is to combine it with solar panels, photovoltaic area that generates the energy that the train needs to run. And believe it or not, we did the math and calculated that the surface, if cladded like this, would help us to generate nearly 50% of the energy that the train is using for its operation, which is crazy because it's a synergetic aspect that your track and your mobility coach, the train and the tracks are at the same time a little power plant that reduce the amount of energy that you need to bring into the city from networks or power plants. At the same time, second idea was to also provide some body for earth to allow plants also to grow along the tracks, to allow for a green element that is not only nice in the urban space, but also to collect the water, to store the water, and to cool down the space. So we came up with some strategy to collect the water and make it run down into the ground. Of course, if you lift up tracks like this, you free up a lot of space on the ground, and so you can allow a sponge city that somebody talked about today, also to arrive in the middle of our circulation areas. But at the same time, of course, to keep some water up in the air to cool down the space below. Then we started to show how this whole system could look like in a typical Berlin road, typical Berlin street, and how it could then grow some plants and become really jungle-like scenarios in some of the streets, providing shadow and freeing up space, as you see here, for other modes of transportation, autonomous car, like charging facilities, bike lanes, and so on. During the year, you would see like blooming cycles maybe, and people could then decide if they would like to have more the lilac or the rose line. So that would then not only be a name, but a reality. But even more important, even more interesting is if you think that in a very consequent way into the future, and we believe that we need to look very closely and very carefully to the ground, the urban public space that we have. If we free up space by inhabiting the third dimension, if we free up space by reducing also individual mobility on the ground, then something like this can happen, that you free up some space for much more greener areas, areas for kids, for people together. And to go a little bit back to what maybe in the 60s and the 70s, the idea of the city was the idea of a green city with buildings sitting in the green. But all the public space was more and more occupied by streets, of course, and parking. So I think there is a little movie. I don't know if that works here. Yeah. Yeah, of course, sometimes we do these movies, as you probably also do all the time, to show how this would look like in the city, so to get a feeling of the dimensions in space. This is a lot higher than what we know from the S-Bahn tracks. You see that this is 2 meter higher and a lot more delicate and reduced in proportion. So that we think this will not only be acceptable, but a real interesting also contribution to the urban space of the future. So why do we do that? I already said that. Car-to-car communication, all the technology that people are thinking of is there, of course, to reduce the space that we occupy on the ground and to regain that and to provide that back to as a public space. And all over the place you see different shades and different solutions that are signs or symptoms of the same development or the same movement. Everybody of you probably knows the High Line in New York. That's one of the greatest examples of how a railway track within the city that was not in use anymore was transformed into a linear park that provides suddenly an alternative to just walking next to the cars on the ground. Here you have a little bit of an overview of the city, and after some years this has been growing into a forest. Very beautiful. So this is apparently something that everybody wants anyhow. Yeah, so we are part of that movement, and at the end of the day we need to also answer, how do we do that? How also in our architectural projects are we contributing to the same idea? One project of ours, very close to Checkpoint Charlie, which is here in Berlin, is trying exactly that. Very close to Potsdamer Platz. If you've been to Berlin, you know where the Reichstag and the Brandenburg Gate is. Berlin Castle and all these other Kodak viewpoints, they basically surround an area that is the Baroque extension to the medieval city, so-called Frederick's city, the Friedrichstadt. The Friedrichstadt, Street here, Friedrichstadt, has, apart from some area where destruction in Second World War was going on, and on the Gendarmenmarkt here, for example, is a very, very dry city. There's not many trees. It's heating up in the summer. So when we started to look at one block, and very close to Checkpoint Charlie, we tried to bring green back into the center of the city. Here's something. He's asking me for something. I don't know. I'm closing that. Let's see if that continues. Yeah. On the piece of land that we were asked to come up with a project for around 350 apartment units, we decided to break up the traditional way to react within the Friedrichstadt with very closed atrium courtyards. So we broke, especially the one that's sitting right at Zimmerstraße, broke up to allow for people to go through, but also light to penetrate through the block and arrive at all these numerous balconies. So the idea was to provide an alternative to the normal traditional roads and the street connections and allowing people to quietly shortcut and connect areas that were separate before. So one of the main aspects is, of course, the idea of the green in here, and you will see that the green is not only then planted within the buildings, but we came up with a concept to also allow trees to inhabit the facades. So the facade folds out, alternating, like in the levels sitting on top of each other, to allow some space for plants, for trees to grow here. That means that people have not only a little balcony, but kind of a garden with a tree in front of their apartment, and that pretty much every apartment has this quality. And that generated the facade. Of course, the facade is, we wanted it to look interesting, but at the same time, it's a very functional thing because the trees provide shadow, they extend the apartment to the outside, and they give something back to all the people, and create an atmosphere that normally only the top floors, the penthouses have, that they have some space in front of there, and also some green in front of them. So there's also a great roof garden, but this is a photograph taken 3 years after the first time when it was ready, and you see that the kind of jungle is growing. And if you go there, and I would like to invite you to go there in the summer, the temperature inside is going down by at least 5-6 degrees. It's crazy how much greenery is doing in an urban environment like this. So starting from there, we were at some point asked by the AIV, Architekten- und Ingenieurverein Berlin, to look at a road in Berlin and to come up with an idea for this road. Also, they said, let's have a little exhibition that was actually, at the end of the day, shown on Unter den Linden in Berlin. They wanted to show examples of how the city could look in the future, especially some roads that lack some quality, obviously. So a lot of space. This is a place very close to Alexanderplatz in the very center of Berlin, the east of Berlin. You find this space in between these prefab buildings, a huge dimension, pretty much completely occupied by space, some trees in the middle, but nobody walks there. So, and when we started to look at the dimension of this area here, this is the Mollstraße, here's the television tower, so you all know this. This space is in continuation with the so-called Torstraße. So you see the dimension. This is exactly as many, there's exactly as many cars running here than there. It's a completely different dimension, of course, and if you let traffic planners, then they get the space, take it and draw roads and parking and so on. So we said, no, let's not do that. Let's reduce the street down to what is needed, it's 4 lanes for traffic, and reserve all the rest for green. Of course, a little provocative, we have big lakes in the middle of the city, but it was necessary for us also to explain the idea, to make it clear and provocative. And this is Platz der Nation, I think is this one called, formerly known as the Leninplatz, huge curved prefab buildings, all of a particular dimension of 10 and more stories. And we said that why can't we transform this space into something like this? So why can't we clear up the space, bring water in and earth and keep the water and create a kind of sponge city, but then also to comment on the idea of the city, because we might be able to see there is still the prefab, the 10-story prefab building is still in there. We just took it absolutely literally, and took out some modules. It's a modular building, so you can take out some modules, and then said, yeah, okay, let's build on top some lightweight wooden components and play with the dimension. Let's get rid of the monumentality and the uniform logic of these buildings and create a more diverse appearance. And I really believe that this is kind of a successful approach to question if it's only the only question is, do we keep the prefab buildings or do we get rid of them and replace them by blocks? We can really do a lot more to these buildings. And I found it very interesting that actually what we talk about today, modular production, prefab buildings, serial production, affordability, living in the green, sponge city, all this has been talked about in the 60s. We're not happy with the results, but in thinking, we're not so far away. We would now provide different solutions, probably, but let's not condemn that phase. I mean, you can really live with a lot of continuity here. Yeah, modular building, super important. I think this was the first project very close to the Ostbahnhof, if you know that, in Berlin. 2 separate buildings. Unfortunately, the client could not buy the piece of land in between, so it's 2 disconnected buildings, office buildings. And this is our first real attempt to hybrid wooden construction, a completely prefabricated modular construction, and especially also in the facade, a modular approach. So we try to come up with one component that can be repetitively used to structure the facade and to also allow some interesting experience. So the idea, of course, was not to only push out a bay window or a little component, but to allow people then to feel outside the building and look into both directions. And I explain you in a minute why the rhythm is as you see it. But you've clearly discovered already that the corner position, of course, is the most interesting one, where we want to remind everybody of the traditional connections, of course, in wood construction on the corners. So it reminds you there is some memory, of course, of all the heritage of building with wood in general as a metaphor. So it's very simple and repetitive and rectangular, and then suddenly you have one angled corner of the side. So what do you do with that? So we're building a triangular core and keep the repetition also on this triangular side. But then we use the system and also the logic of the facade to then generate one interesting corner, where suddenly these little bay windows seem to be just the faces of larger boxes that suddenly intersect and sit on top of each other. Yeah, of course, building with all what we need for new work environments, but what I found particularly interesting is for the internal spaces that we discovered together with a client, that these little bay windows at the end of the day are not just jokey and funny additions to the space, but that they are the areas where people meet. And that made me think a lot about our work environments, that usually we do these open areas and the communication areas are in the middle. That's very often done. In the middle is the table where everybody meets, but also where people walk. And we discovered in another project that actually the area to meet is best on the perimeter, where you're kind of getting out, or you put yourself out of the office environment, the office context, and you're also not disturbing anybody else, and you're not mixing a meeting with circulation areas. That is always also very disturbing. So we were then showing how different these little bays then could be, of course, inhabited and designed. And of course there's roof terraces and sunken gardens, blah, blah, blah. All very nice, but not really catering to the topic. Modular building is a very, at the moment, is for me super fascinating aspect, because we see so many boring modular buildings. We see intelligence getting cheaper. It's great. Many companies, they are skyrocketing some other, but it's all very boring. It looks like container buildings. So how can we deal with that? And one project that is commenting of this to this fact is a building on one of the longest sites that we ever dealt with. It's 18-meter wide, but 320-meter long, along the Neuköllner Schifffahrtskanal canal in Neukölln. And we radically said, let's not hide the logic of the components, the modular components that we're using, but we're lifting it all up. And the ground floor, the ground floor and the floor above, these are the floors that we then start to design, that we keep them very open. We create something that could be seen like a bridge structure that supports all this modular construction above. But that allows a lot more accessibility and, of course, provides public spaces, gastronomy, and so on. Entrances to boarding houses, and so on. Repetitive logic of balconies also important here. Oh, I'm going up, sorry. Different, wrong direction. Of course, a very long building needs to be interrupted with two public spaces, so two courtyards that connect also the streetscape behind with the waterfront, the promenade on this side. There's two existing old cranes that we keep in their position. One is used for the technology to also cater and support a stage, an outdoor open air stage, and the other one is going to be used as a toy, actually, as a structure for kids to run up and downwards. So that's the idea of how we see this to be constructed. You know that traditionally a lot of building material in Berlin was brought into the city on the canals, so we believe this could be done here as well. So of course, numerous arguments for using that modular construction. So you see these beams sitting on the ground, and then the repetitive logic of the container sitting on top. So this all prefabricated, but in a way that we try to start learning how in the future we could deal with the logic of these modules. Okay, and another adventure that we stepped into was with a developer friend from Los Angeles, Jana Mrowetz, who we know for like 25 years. She came to the office and she said she's done with normal developments, and she would like to develop a modular community idea. That was not a little bit fuzzy in the beginning, but we then said it's such an interesting idea, like a densified suburb maybe that could be located at the perimeter of the cities, or it could also be communities somewhere in Brandenburg. So it was an interesting structure because we very much focused not on modular design, but on how communities work. That we could maybe all agree on like reducing our private space in order to, if at the same time we win large communal areas and also some quality space. For example, one of the first ideas was 30, 40 families living together, and they would be able then to finance a little spa with a pool. So who would not move into such a community? So if it's affordable, we would probably be ready to reduce our private space and gain some communal areas. So the idea was, let's come up with a module that allows for tiny houses, but also for the construction of communal co-living, co-working areas. So you will see the module in a bit. You see a house made out of 2 modules in the back, but these modules are developed in a way that they can be combined into larger units, into these living areas. Let's run through another little presentation. The company that we founded is called Urban Cell. So we're also part of this company. That's something that we sometimes do, that we found companies like solar kiosk and stuff. It's a little crazy. But these modules consist out of 2 boxes, only that the top box has a pitched roof, so it doesn't look like a container. It looks like a conventional house, and they can be combined in different directions. It's basically a house with an upper bedroom. So down there you have a living kitchen unit and a bathroom. all the technical components are combined in one wall. It's super easy, and then of course the idea is that you can combine them into larger units, larger houses, community houses, and so on. And of course also into little spa components. And this is something that we have been looking for investors now, and suddenly there's a possibility coming up in Portugal. So we're building the first community now in Algesur with a manufacturer close to Porto. We're building the first prototype right now, so it will be placed there in 2 months, and then we see how much we need to learn, and then build the first little community for, in this case, digital nomads, so people who live there for quite some time during the year, and then of course also need some spaces to sit together and meet other people. So specialists like in computing that focus on their work during the day. They go surfing, of course, but also need to see some other people. Yeah. But from the communities, the suburban communities, more into the urban environments. Also, the project that is also very modular, doesn't look like on the first side, but also developed out of a modular strategy. But it's the first project that I would like to use to explain how much we also need to look at in transformation of our urban spaces. It's not only about coming up with new architectural ideas that we place somewhere where there's some space left, but we also need to transform the existing much more intelligent that we did in the in the past. This is one of the examples of an existing building that looked like this. The roof could not stay, it was contaminated, and there were some additions already by a former investor who suddenly ran out of money or didn't have a concept to solve the project. And then we came up with a concept to take off the roof, replace the roof with, again, a modular approach of apartments that sit on 2 stories on top of this building. Some more intelligence to the floor plans, but these boxes inspired then also the approach for new additions at the street front and also in the back, consisting of always the same modular unit, also with balconies of different depth. So some of these balconies or loggias are longer, some are shorter, and that's why it looks like some boxes are shifting. But in fact, the thermal facade is just in one line, in one flat plane, which makes it very simple and easy. Also some interesting idea for how to deal with an old building. We had huge hallways, big staircases, a lot of space that could not be used. And we came up with the idea to keep these hallways only on the ground floor and then give access to some cores that go up to the upper floors to reach some smaller hallways and occupy some parts of the hallway with bedrooms. So we pushed and boosted up the efficiency of the building quite a bit, which suddenly made it possible. But it was also the first project where we developed our Berlin apartment, as we call it. The client wanted us to design 2-room apartments with 50 to 55 square meters. And that was the first project where I said, yeah, but you also need to provide some communal areas because your clients, your tenants will be people who just moved to Berlin, who don't know anybody. And he said, no, of course not. I lose square meters. We cannot do that. You all know this discussion. Then I said, okay, let's see if we can shrink the apartments a little bit, keep the same quality. Can we then use these square meters to do a little bit of public areas? And he said, yeah, okay, come up with an idea. And there was a little competition in the office. How small can we do a 2-room apartment? So we ended up with 37.5 square meters at the end of the day. that allowed us, these saved nearly 15 square meters, of course, enabled us to do many more apartments, which made him very happy, but we also could then do very large communal areas, some community spaces, lounges, libraries, also dining areas for people to rent for a birthday party or even some official representative conditions. Also there's a cafe, of course, biomarket, kindergarten, and so on. But it was only possible to do that because we found an intelligence for the small unit. It's very important to understand that always, that you can have the nicest ideas and you provide the beauty for the society and for the world, but you also need to convince people who put their money in and want to have their profit, maybe. So it always is both, yeah. Yeah, and similar strategy maybe also. But here another aspect that was interesting to me, a project in Schöneberg in Berlin, second largest area department in Berlin. And this is not only a new building, but a renovation and transformation of existing buildings of 3 eras, 3 times. An existing post office, second largest post office of Berlin in Schöneberg, like a neo-Renaissance building from 1907. And also some close to Art Deco, early brick modernism in the back, and then from the 20s, really brick modernism, rounded additions. Different stages of the post office that grew in the 20s. And we found out that the reason for the curves were not, in the first place, not like an aesthetic idea, but the post bought trucks for the first time. So suddenly they had the possibility to transport all these packages and stuff. And they needed, of course, some space and garage space to load and unload and mix and distribute the packages. And that's why all these buildings are rounded, because you needed to drive around, like Corbusier Villa Savoie, that's causing all these curves in the facades. Yeah, and this, so this is a pretty complex block filling structure. In addition here, the 20th building, the one, oh no, it's actually 1903, not 1907. And also in the back, one space that was left for us to fill. We pick up on the logic of the bricks. Here, if you walk through, we wanted to open up, similar to the Checkpoint Charlie building, and allow people to walk through. And many of the developers close these courtyards in order to allow for a safe space in the center. I don't believe in that, so we always open up. This is a Jewish cultural center that we designed inside one of these buildings, and then did the renovation of these buildings from 25, 26. And then also some addition in the back, where we're always playing with the logic of these balconies to kick out, and with the possibility for brick to create these very soft facades. And you've probably seen also in the front the entrance area where the facade is kind of bending in and seems to be reacting to the visitor. In some areas, the facade is pushed back, and you see what with parametric design you can do to bricks today. So the very solid structure of the bricks in this case, we wanted to communicate that it seems to be reacting to the flow. Again, going back to circulation and mobility in the on the ground floor. Yeah, that's the logic. Again, the logic of these bricks that in some panels are prefabricated and then mounted here on this location. Also in the roof, the facade is kind of bending back to allow for, to react to the setback regulations of the site. And what I like first and foremost is that the normal pushed-in logic of the facade, so the negative of the windows, is with this technique turns into the windows are suddenly popping out as positive objects, like positive components. And what we call a Lochfassade suddenly turns into something completely different just by moving the facade a little bit. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, some images of the backside. Yeah. So transforming the city also means let's transform the big icons and the big monsters of the 60s. This is what we're currently working on. I can't tell you too much about it, but I would like to show you a little bit of how we think that we can save this this big icon of Berlin, the International Congress Center, the ICC. Of course, we will allow the volocopters to also land there, but to give you an idea of what this is, this has been one of the largest conference and congress centers in Europe. It is abandoned since 2014, so nothing's happening there, and the politicians have been thinking about what to do with it, and there's a big call for applications, and we're part of this process, so I can't tell you too much of this, but I will show you a little bit of about the strategies. So we're looking at the existing building here. For some reason, also the architects of the place had foreseen to add another building on the other side of the street here. We're also doing that, and we're keeping the logic of the ICC, which is basically that you have an inner corridor, inner connection flanked by two sides that are mostly vertical circulation spaces. And we continue with that logic on both ends. We're ending a new hotel on the southern side, and we're proposing a component on the other side that also looks at the ICC, so that continuous path in the middle is running through and connecting all these different connections. We have a new junction of highways in the south, so we need to have a new phase in the south of the ICC to this circulation areas, and we're cutting the vertical logic of we are respecting the vertical logic of the ICC. The upper areas, the yellow ones, are the two big main halls that you've seen in the photograph before. Below are two levels of lobbies that we have a particular concept of a mixed-use scenario for that, and something that has been underestimated so far is that below, under the ground, there's a huge area for taxis to wait there and to allow people to access the building and the events there, and huge areas in the basement for technical components. So we're rethinking the main hall to make it more flexible to also connect both halls through the main stage to allow for also bigger fairs to happen there. It's like 10,000 square meters of space that allows the ICC to basically become one new fair hall for the Berlin Fair. But we also have lots of ideas for the main corridors, and especially for the underground. So as a logistic hub, as a charging facility, Berlin's largest charging facility that everybody can also go to and charge electric vehicles. So that's so far. And the last project that I would like to show you is also starting with an icon from the late 60s, not in Germany, in Tbilisi, a project that we have just been finishing the schematic design for. An existing hotel from the socialist era in the heart of the capital of Georgia. We had been turning this into a hotel already 20 years ago. And it also has a casino, it's very successful, it's the most successful hotel in the city, and has some radical casino design also. We actually got partly got the job because we had worked in Las Vegas before, so that was suddenly we were trustworthy enough to come up with a like casino in Tbilisi, and yeah, then we could do the full round and said, yeah, you know, the chips that sit on top of each other, this is how it should look like, and yeah, so that's back in the days, 20 years ago. Easy narrative, so we all have done this. But then what I would like to show you is in the area next to it. So the client owns a lot of space and also buildings all around this hotel, especially one plot, which is white here, a sloped side. And what I would like to show here is that it's positioned in the urban fabric. You have the lower area of Tbilisi, which is more a grid of a city with 5 to 7 stories. And then you have the other side, a very steep hill, you could say, and one main axis running through half height, which is Rustaveli Boulevard. So if you see on TV the demonstrations of people against the current government, then this is always here. It connects the old part of the city, Freedom Square, with the hotel square. Actually, it's a very important position in the city, 30 meters above the river. And then we have that very important bridge there. And you see that our side is suddenly the link between these worlds, the very famous streets and connections. And this is our proposal. It's one high-rise, 6 additional buildings. A very important icon here, the birthhouse of one of the most famous writers and authors in Georgia. So we came up with a strategy to especially bring people in and allow very gentle paths up the hill to overcome these 30-meter differences for bikes and pedestrians. So it's very long ramps that toss and turn all the time to make it easy for pedestrians to get from the upper, more official part of the city down into the economic center of the city. So you would, coming from down there, you would take some steps or an elevator to this very long ramp that leads you up to the main plaza, where our first hotel is sitting, the high-rise, and surrounded by these buildings that seem to be surrounding and providing a central special plaza for this museum kind of author's birthhouse, a big long ramp that hovers on top of the main 0-level green garden. So different ways to come up from the lower areas, filled with numerous program components, of course, and again a very green main level of the inner courtyard that connects all ends and all buildings and all retail accesses. So you see that already there's some sort of solid base for all these buildings and some hovering components that sit on top of each other. Where does this come from? This is an image of Tbilisi, old part of the city. One of the most famous locations there is buildings that hover and sit on top of the rocks next to the main river. And everybody back in the days built these balconies, these loggias. It's fascinating. The whole city is full of these balconies. So we see, we not only took the main concept to come up with some rocky base landscape with 6 buildings sitting on top of that, but we were mostly also looking at the facades. And we have hundreds of these photographs and fed them into our AI program and then try to use AI to analyze the DNA of the historical facades for us and then combine that with our design strategy. It was always twofold and then intertwined, that we did a normal design process and an AI process at the same time, and they were overlapping. So we've, of course, along the way, not only graphic analyses, but also relief structures. Some of them might remind us also of some brutalist 60s, 70s architecture, especially in Georgia, also in other Central Asian countries, which is interesting that also the historical DNA, the AI says, was also built into the 60s architecture, which is kind of an interesting learning. But these are AI images then. So we took some detours and through going back and forth, ended up with a facade that has very much to do with the historical source it came from. And this is also a three-dimensional facade with some perforated areas, a system, a hexagonal logic that is taken out of the cultural heritage of the country. You see again the more rougher basalt-clad structure of that big rock extension, like a man-made artificial landscape that reminds us maybe of the rocks of the historical city center. But then the hovering buildings on top that reflect and meditate a lot on the memory of the historical facades. And I think if you've seen the traditional facades in Tbilisi once, you always would be reminded of that. There's a very close connection between the history and what we try to do today. So that's the last project I wanted to show you, and a little bit of an insight on the new technologies also. But first and foremost, I think it's about the attitude and a lot of love for the locations also that we look at. And there's some aspects of the cities of the future that I hope we can talk about a little bit. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thomas Willemeit, thank you very much for your talk. Are there any questions?
Come on.
Come on.
Yeah.
Out of the dark.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Hyperloop? What is the status of this project? You told us about that the motorway, that this will be installed at the motorways, at the center of the motorway. Is that a realistic project in a way that that you do steps forward? Because it's absolutely fantastic, this new technology, which I learned a couple of months ago, that this will completely change our attitude of traveling.
Yeah, and it's also, these concepts are in a process of constant change. Some of us might have also looked at the designs that big Bjarke Ingels-Studien has done for some Hyperloop studies to connect Los Angeles with Seattle, San Francisco, and so on. But that came to an end at some point, and one guy from this consortium told me why, but I didn't understand really. But there's some completely new technical approach to where the most complicated part of the technology is sitting. And before, it seems like it was necessary to have very complicated tracks and a more simple technical device inside this module, the train itself. But they turned that around. So now these cabins seem to be a little more complicated, but the tracks are much more simple. And that's why they think that it will be realistic and can also be affordable to do. The status is that there's a consortium was built about like 12, 15 months ago with the TU in Munich and the Deutsche Rail operation. So they are have the operational expertise for trains and all kinds of tram systems. And then some companies who own the technology, like Siemens, and also Bügel is also part of that because they have all the technology for the tubes, which are subject to extension, like under temperature, and that's why the design is done with some cover and shading, also as you've seen probably. So there's a group of big companies that contribute to the R&D now of this project. And funny enough, it's the mayor of Hamburg, who's like the most, Mr. Tschentscher, who has been agreeing to studying the connection from Hamburg to Kiel for the Olympic the application for the Olympics. So this is one of the study research pilot studies that we're looking at, but at the moment it's about like funding the first 800 meters, I think, that will be close to, how's that note again here, where you arrive with the freeway in Hamburg, the Horner Kreisel also, yeah? So somewhere there should be like the first piece, as far as I know. So there's realistic discussions about like funding the first pilot now. Yeah. So crazy. It's crazy, yeah.
There have been many proposals of trains where you can change between trains at the train traveling. You also showed that these capsules connect without stopping. Do you have an understanding at which speed the connection will take place?
The speed for the long connections is about 500 kilometers.
And the joining and dejoining will happen.
Yeah,
the thing is,
there's always the same logic. So the composition of the train is done in one location. So you're kind of booking to start from somewhere, let's say Potsdam, and then you get your departure moment according to when that train is composed. So you go there, and then the train's starting. But the composition of the train is that the first one to detach is, of course, put in the back, and then they slow down, they detach and slow down, and then they get off the main track and then do some whatever, connect to an airport or stop or whatever.
More questions?
My voice was a bit strange, but I will connect to the topic of Stefan with this high-speed train. Can you explain in an example of this project, how does it happen? Who comes to you to ask this? Because classically we are coming from architecture, building buildings. So working with materials, working with clients. And in this case, you have so many technical features, so you have much more to talk with engineers, like also the question of Enno, which speed is it?
Genau.
So they don't ask you only for shapes, you have to get an understanding of the technique. So in maybe one or two projects, can you explain how is the constellation, people coming to you, and how you work together?
This is caused to serendipity, as we always say. Yeah, it comes to you if you're not really looking for it, but you're providing the possibility that it arrives at you. Sounds strange, but that's basically the case. I mean, the one story is that I got a phone call one day from an old man from Switzerland. He called me, and I thought that's one of these clients who have a little bit of a house and wants an extension of the house. So you know all these calls. Yeah, I have 10,000, and what can I do? And it started like this, but then at some point he said, yeah, he has a project in the Deutsche Museum in Munich, like the technical museum in Germany. And he has that project there, and he's looking for an exponat. He needs some expertise. He needs some design for a little magnetic model, a model of a magnetic train or something. And it was very weird. And we said, okay, yeah, we could talk again at some point, because I think I had a meeting in Munich anyhow the next week, and I said, okay, let's meet in Munich. He was saying he was coming to Munich. In the meantime, I Googled. This was a Nobel Prize winner of physics, who found out that ceramics, if you cool them down to 250 degrees minus, that they have a memory to keep the position in a magnetic field. Sounds totally crazy, but imagine there's a magnetic field, and you put a piece of ceramics, like from the wall, you put there, you cool it down, don't use your hand, but you cool it down 250 degrees, and it stays within there. It's floating. It's crazy. And he then came up with the idea that if you build 4 boxes 4 cooled down liquids. And the boxes are out of ceramics. And you put them on trucks and create a magnetic rail. And then in between these 4 boxes, you build some sort of a car, a mini car, that it should float. And he calculated, and it works. So he has 3 universities, one in southern Germany, one in Switzerland, one in Austria. And they are working on this system. Long story short, he said, yeah, we want to show that in Munich in the museum. And can you help us and design something? And then we designed something for 2 years, with Mike Schleich, some hanging rails, where we totally got anywhere. Crazy design, and of course, turned out cost 20 million and will never be realized. Everybody was kind of, and Munich did the new extension to the museum. There was no money anymore. The thing failed. And some weeks after, I got the phone call from Bögel, who I did not know do these magnetic trains, but they were involved because they were supposed to finance the whole thing in Munich. And they saw our work. We worked great together, and I had no idea, but they came back and they said, yeah, we have actually a real magnetic train. Wouldn't you want to design it? So it was a total detour. Or for the Hyperloop was a good friend of ours, you all know him, like Olaf Hoffmann, who was in our Zeichensaal. Olaf Hoffmann, you know what he did. He started with an exercise when we all bought here the mobile cell phones. He came up with a strategy to assist all the companies who like O2 and Vodafone and so on, so forth, to tell them how to do like building permits, to get permits for the antennas on the buildings. And you know how many we needed. I mean, this is thousands and thousands. So he was one of the first to find a repetitive way to easy get permits for these antennas. And that's what he did. He made a lot of money. Then he bought Dorsch Consult. You know Dorsch Consult? Like 4,000 special planners all over the place. He made it bigger and bigger and then sold it, and now he's investing in companies. Olaf is crazy. And he's part of this group and called us, hey, you've done these magnetic trains, can you help us? So it's these, so as if you're sometimes, or with Volocopter, we just won a pitch. We did a big pitch, and we won it. Yeah, and since we work for Mercedes-Benz quite a bit for years now, as also you're in these mobility networks a little bit. So it's a completely different world, and then one comes to the other. So it's a lot of anecdotes. I can tell you more.
Let's listen to more next door over a glass of wine. Thank you so much, Thomas Willemeit, for being here today, also being part of the
It was a pleasure.
Crit.
Thank you very much.